Richmond City Planning Commission meeting. This Wednesday, February the 15th, 2023. Clerk. Yes.
Either way, it's fine. Okay, Mr. Shu,
Yes.
Ms. Miles,
Present.
Dr. Short,
Here.
Dr. Miller,
Here.
Ms. Perkins,
Here.
and Chairman Estelle.
Here. Okay, I hope
Okay.
everyone has had a chance to look over the minutes from January the 18th, 2023. And if so, I'd like to have a motion.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes of January 18th, 2023.
Second. Yeah, I got a second.
Okay, Commissioner Shu,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles,
Yes.
Commissioner Short,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle.
Yes. Next on the agenda is a zoning classification requested for regulations for solar farms. Someone here to represent? Give your name, please, for you.
Yes, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Todd Osterloh. I'm an attorney with Sturgill Turner Law Firm out of Lexington, and I'm working with Acciona. I had the pleasure of working with them over the last couple of years on projects here in town. Along with me, I've got Adam Stratton, who's the project manager for Acciona. And you may recall that we were here at a workshop last month to talk about some of the issues, maybe answer a few questions. And so we wanted to come back and present what our recommendation to the Planning Commission would be. And maybe as we described a little bit before, and we've also provided some materials, Acciona is a global sustainable energy company. They've got facilities in 5 or 6 continents. They don't have any facilities yet here in Kentucky, but they have been approved by the state siting board for 2 facilities here in the state. And the reason that we're here before you is that there's a parcel of land to the north side of town, about 330 acres on McCord Lane, that they would like to use to develop a facility. And so in looking at the development ordinance, right now solar is not permitted in a specific zone. And so what our recommendation would be, and what we've suggested, is to have that be, solar facilities be a permitted use in agricultural zones here in the city. And I just wanted to address maybe some of the issues that we heard from the workshop, and I think there were some questions raised. Well, is solar appropriate for an agricultural zoned area? And I think that it is, and there's several reasons for that. And it largely generates from the characteristics and similarities between the two. One being is that you can still maintain a solar facility as having agricultural use. Most notably, a lot of facilities will have sheep grazing operations on their properties. That's beneficial in 2 ways, right? Number one, you're still using it the way that it was in an agricultural purpose, maybe slightly different if there was cattle on there, crops or something different. But then secondarily, the grass that's growing underneath the panels obviously grows, but if it grows too tall, then it will interfere with the operations of those panels. And so then the sheep can keep that down, and there's less mechanical mowing that would have to be done. And not just that, other similar characteristics, noise levels. So on the solar facilities, there's 2 primary drivers of noise, one being the inverter that, in a layman's terms, kind of collects the energy, and it has a bit of a hum, like a refrigerator or like a pad-mounted, I picture these green transformer boxes on the ground that you might hear a slight hum. And the other noise from a solar facility during operations would be the panel motor trackers. So the panels will track with the sun every 15 minutes or so. There's a slight degree adjustment, and there's a slight noise that comes from that. But again, very low level. And as, of course, you move away from that noise, place where the noise is coming from, that dissipates. So when you get to the property boundary, it's just the same effectively as what the ambient noise would be in an agricultural area. And building on that, another similarity, low density. So agricultural property might have a single-family house on there. During operations, solar facility is going to have a few maintenance folks coming to the property to operate, maintain the facility, but it's not going to build heavy traffic or extra resources that the city would have to provide, like significant waste management or anything like that, sewer. So very similar there to agricultural use. It's environmentally safe, which I know is very big concern for agricultural property, quite frankly, for all properties, right? But I've even heard the argument that maybe these solar facilities are even better for the environment than certain agricultural operations, if you think of chemicals on crops, depending on their applied, or even if there's too many cattle, too many hogs on a property, they can destroy the ground and cause stormwater management issues. And so I think that's why we've seen in fact, not most, all of the facilities that have been approved here by the state board in Kentucky are all on what I would consider agricultural land, whether the locality actually has it zoned as agricultural or there is no zoning, but you walk out to it and like, this is a farm. And that's really why we are encouraging the Planning Commission, and the way it would work is going on to the City Commission to have a text amendment to be permitted in an agricultural zone. I think one of the other things that we heard at the workshop is, okay, well, if this facility is in place for 30 years, 40 years, what happens afterwards? Can it then go back and still be the agricultural use that was before? And that's absolutely true. There are decommissioning requirements, not only by the State Siting Board and in many leases, but we also propose that in the ordinance so that there's also that local control. Frankly, maybe that's a belt and suspenders method because you've got protections in many different layers. But that would ensure that when the project is done at the end of its life, that everything is taken off and the property is restored in a way that is similar to what it would exist now. And not only is that all that infrastructure dismantled, but the panels can either be recycled or be reused for another purpose or at another location to be used. And so that's always what the plan is going to be for in particular this project. And that enables the property to be restored to exactly a similar condition, I shouldn't say exactly, but a similar condition to what it is now, and be able to be used in an agricultural setting or whatever else the property owner would want it to be, obviously in compliance with the local and state regulations. Beyond that, we'd like to just point out the benefits that these projects can bring, and most notably, I think it's community involvement. Acciona prides itself in being a good community steward, and so that's why it's tried to have a presence here in Richmond, here in Madison County. They're a member of the Richmond Chamber of Commerce. They sponsored several local events. They've sponsored the Taste of Richmond. They sponsored the Spoon Bread Festival down in Berea. They've worked with 4-H Club. So that they're trying to have that local presence to show that they're not just some outsider coming in and wanting to use the land without actually having some real presence here. We've also provided some information about the tax increases that the city would benefit. The primary driver behind that is personal property taxes, so where all that infrastructure, the solar panels are valued, and the city would be able to retain the increased personal property taxes of that. I think we calculate that at roughly $200,000 for the life of the project. And that's $200,000 that the city is not otherwise getting from the use of the property right now. That builds exponentially for the county when you factor in schools, libraries, fees, whatever else there might be associated with those kind of things. And I think the number in the documents was $1.2 million for that. I think the one other point that I wanted to make is that even if the city does approve this, that's not the end of the regulatory permitting process. The project would still have to go before the State Siting Board and get a construction permit from them. That's a 7-member body, 3 of whom are the Public Service Commissioners, 2 of whom are cabinet secretaries for the governor's administration, and then 2 of them are local appointees. And in fact, the state statute requires the Planning Commission chairman to be on that board, as well as another local member to be appointed by the governor. In the 2 siting board cases that have gone before now, well, one's already been approved and one's pending. Richard Thomas was the other appointee. You may be familiar with him. He's a former city manager here for Richmond. But that helps ensure that there is a local presence on that board and a local voice to be able to be heard, to advocate on the concerns here in the city, as opposed to just some board in Frankfort. So that's what we put together, just a recommendation that we would encourage this board, this planning commission, to recommend to the city commission. We put up a very simple, we think, ordinance that would allow for these facilities to be a permitted use in agriculture. It also contains, like I mentioned, a decommissioning requirement, and then also that minimum setback of 200 feet, such that any sort of infrastructure, so the solar panels, anything associated with generating that electricity would be at least 200 feet away from a non-participating property. I'm happy to field any questions if you have them. Also have Adam here to, if you have questions specifically for him.
Do you know exactly on that acreage where it would be put at, where they will be put?
I don't precisely know. I think, obviously, it's very well. It's an early stage. The projects at this stage wouldn't typically have that engineering process go in. They have to go in as developing the project and looking at karst topography. Are there sinkholes that they need to avoid? Are there wetlands that they need to avoid? But I presume that there's not anything specific beyond that.
No, at this time, there's not anything, as Todd said. We need to go through kind of our full permitting process first, which includes the environmental assessment, geotech on the site, all those considerations before we lay out where exactly the panels themselves would be installed on the site. But we do like the parcel, and we expect like the ground coverage ratio to be good. It's fairly flat, the lay of the land for this area. So we expect it to be a fairly productive parcel.
I was just asking that on one that I know I'm familiar with, 64 around Winchester. It's right next, well, it's pretty close to 64 right there to the interstate, and I didn't know if that's the proximity where you would put something like this at, or I guess it all depends on the condition, what you're gonna need, for it to work, I guess, on it. But I was just curious on that. Now, this is that McCord Road out off the interstate right there.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Now, I'm gonna ask this question. How well does that work as far as dust and stuff? Because that road right there, when they go down that road, it's covered. It feels covered because it's not paved. It's all gravel. How well does that work?
In general, I mean, if we could mitigate that. We have facilities all over the world, as Todd was saying. So we have facilities, for example, in deserts. So we have cleaning mechanisms to deal with that kind of stuff. I really wouldn't expect that much dust to affect the panel production, but if there was such thing, then we have methods to deal with it. So
I have a question that has nothing to do with, you realize it's really gray in the winter here. I can't imagine, I'm just curious why you all picked Kentucky.
Sure. Well, there's several reasons why I'm picking Kentucky. One being is that there's different transmission systems that projects can sell to. There's actually 4 different ways that can be done here in Kentucky. But one of the benefits is if you can get involved in what's called the PJM system, so Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts?
13 states.
There you go, 13 states. It's in the southern, obviously we're in the southern end of that, and so there's more solar hours here than further north. So there are a lot of reasons, and certainly all these companies that are coming in or looking for projects have definitely crunched their numbers, done the calculus to say, yes, we can make this project viable. And that's certainly why prices for solar energy have been coming down, and we see companies like Kentucky Utilities and LG&E proposing significant solar expansion to their portfolio.
Yeah, and I'll add to that really it's our customers that drive us to locations. So as Todd said, the Fortune 500 companies that buy most of the electricity that we produce globally come to us and say, we want to site a facility in Kentucky. We'd like to grow there, and we would like to be provided with renewable energy in order to do that. So they mandate in a way where we should go, and at the same time, as Todd said, there's a grid here which is the largest grid in the world as far as the amount of generation capacity that is connected in PJM, these 13 states. Not many people realize that, but this is you're part of a global monstrosity here as far as the amount of generation that's on the grid. And as we know, some of that generation is coming off over time from other resources, and that needs to be replaced.
Thanks.
Do you tend to work with the topography that you have? I know as you made a comment just a second ago about that this had a tendency to be rather flat, but
Yeah.
if you had one that was more rolling, do you work with what you've got, or do you have to go in there and do any excavation to any degree, or?
Good question. Yeah, standard policy for us is no cut and fill. So all our hydrology studies and everything that we do, anything that comes out in the topography where we consider a no build zone, we don't. So yeah, on this parcel and pretty much any parcel that we've looked at in this county, we're not considering doing any cut and fill.
Gotcha.
Philip, you got
Yeah,
anything?
Phil. Everybody good on their questions for the applicant? Okay. I think it's important to point out, one thing that's taken place, especially in Kentucky, and you see it in other cities and counties, and some have developed ordinances to try to regulate solar panels and solar farms, as what's being called here. And what's taking place, we're essentially behind the curve. So we don't have regulations for solar farms and panels. Right now, we don't regulate outside of the building code if you want to put panels all over your house or in your front yard or anything like that. So I'll commit to you by the next meeting that we will have established regulations, and I want to point out I intend to mirror what Maysville has done. If you're familiar with Maysville, Kentucky's ordinance, we intend to mirror that, and it's fairly restrictive based on some internal conversations and what I believe the pulse is right now. The interest for a massive solar farm on our available commercial property is not a really it's not really looked at very fondly right now, and I intend to present to Maysville something similar to what Maysville's done, and it will regulate, for example, large-scale solar systems to 10 acres. So this is 380 acres or something like that. That's my intent. That'll be something that'll be put before you. If it's something you want to do, so be it. If you want to tweak that and change it, or if you want to have a work session and talk about it and come up with some of our own avenues, that's fine. And it would become part of the development ordinance, so it would go to the city commission for 2 readings as well. And it would be considered a text amendment in addition. So my thought would be, going back to what we talked about, I think before some of you were on the board as well, possibly be a conditional use in a certain zone with regulations. And some of it can be fairly restrictive to try to limit big, massive solar farms, but on top of that, it would also begin to regulate if you want to put solar panels on your house, how, when they have to be permitted and things like that, which that also helps us on the building code side. And may, in the future, it's possible we have these things, and I've already seen it, popping up in people's backyards and things like that. So right now, that's the intent of the city administration to put together something of that nature and submit that before you. So my recommendation is we table it until, if we choose to have a work session, we can make that decision tonight, talk about it, but table it to the next meeting, and we'll have something solid before you. The problem that I have with this a little bit is the fact that you've got a lot of infrastructure out there, and that land could be put to different use or whatever, but it's also, you're going to continue to have it zoned agriculture. And in the city, agriculture really isn't even a zone, because the city doesn't want agriculture in the city. It wants it developed, so that, because it's expanding. So we're going to have an area that's going to skip, basically, that's going to be zoned agriculture, maybe. And at the same time, it's going to be that way for 20 years. And a lot of things can happen in 20 years. So
I'm kind of hesitant, why didn't you want to put it out in the county? It would make more sense to put it in the county.
Well, I mean, I think number one, the main reason for that specific parcel, well, two reasons, I guess. One is that it is a good location for Acciona, but it's also the property owner. What does the property owner want? And he, or I think they, are willing to lease it for this use, but they have expressed this interest that it stay agricultural because they do want that ability, whether it's 20 years or however long it is, to be able to restore that property back to agricultural for either them or whoever inherits it from them, to be able to use it in possibly in that fashion. And the other thing and I completely understand your concern and your interest in that. The other thing I noted, though, I was looking through the comprehensive plan earlier today and recognized that it is one of the few parcels in future land use. So when we're looking out to 2040, that it is still designated in that green color for agricultural use in the comp plan. So I think that further supports maybe a rationale, particularly for this parcel, as to why it would be appropriate in this
See,
situation.
the city's already moving out that way.
Sure, no, yeah.
And you've got an area right off the expressway. Like I said, you've got a lot of infrastructure that the taxpayers have paid for. So I'm a little hesitant to put something there that's going to continue to make it agriculture. And of course, we could say where Richmond Center was agriculture. Was that a benefit to the city? I think it probably was, with taxes and other things, and brought a lot of people here and kind of thing. So I'm iffy about it because of that. I'm not sure that in the county would not be a better area. I have no problem with it. I think it's a worthwhile project except for solar energy, but I'm just not sure it's the right place.
Okay, appreciate your expressing your concerns.
Thank you for that. And just another comment, you said it's a good spot for Acciona. It's specifically a good spot for Acciona because as we've discussed before in the work session, just to reiterate it, that how we come to a site initially is we do a study of the electrical grid. And so it's not specifically the lay of the land, the parcel and whatnot. It's actually that point on the grid which allows for the capacity to be injected to the grid, specifically there. So it's very hard to move those, what we call points of interconnection, around on the grid in order to get the same efficiency of the facility.
I understand. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any more questions from the commissioners?
You don't want to table this?
You want to table it?
I make a recommendation, we table this until the next meeting, and we get a review of the new restrictions that are going to be on.
Second.
Do we want a work session too?
Yeah.
That could be the best way to do it.
Okay, so,
And so I can throw it out, we will make sure you're aware of the work sessions and any meetings we have, and we'll try to send you what we have.
Yeah, they should be
Give you
Yeah,
time
that'd be
to
great.
see them.
We'd certainly like to provide some insight, from our perspective at least, as to that regulation that's being prepared, and then provide you with that information, answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Before we figure out a work session or not, let's just, so it's tabled. Commissioner Shu,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles,
Yes.
Commissioner Short,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Sell.
Yes.
Okay, it's tabled.
Okay, next on the, we want to set up a work session on it now. What?
You can do that now, or you can do it later, or? Would you like to have a work session and me figure out a date and communicate with you?
Huh?
Would you like to hold a work session and have me figure out a date and communicate that to you?
Yeah,
That'll work.
we'll do that, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
then you can keep going.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the zone map amendment request for 4 under FAR LLC property located at Hampton Way, existing zone R2, B3, proposed zone PUD.
You see where I'm coming from on
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense too.
that? I know people want their land.
Pete, if you don't mind,
Up an area.
pull it up real fast.
Very important.
I can sneak in front of you.
Good evening. I'm Pete McEachran. I represent 400 Par. This is the third time we've been here, so I think you all have some familiarity with the project.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same as it was the last time we were here, except that we have gone to condominiums instead of apartments. There was an objection to apartments, so we have made that change. Otherwise, it's the same. I'd like to kind of explain how we got here. Before we started this project, one of the principals with 400 Par had conversations with the mayor and traded emails to try and find out what the city needed. The mayor had two requests. One, affordable housing, single-family housing, and more apartments and townhouses for either rental units or for sale. He said right now there's a shortage of apartments in the city, and we needed more. That's what we did. It's exactly what we did. And that's what is reflected in the original, well, the one before this. So essentially it's the same. We've switched from apartments to condominiums, which are different. I mean, they're a different animal legally, and they have pros and cons. It creates an additional expense for the developers because there's more legal work involved in setting them up. So basically, that's where we are. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And
These are three-story buildings?
no, they're two-story
They're
buildings.
two-story. Are they still 12 units per building?
Yes.
And again, my main concern has always been my initial concern, which was the traffic that creates. Now, going into a condominium as opposed to an apartment probably cuts down the traffic a bit because there won't be student rental, I wouldn't suppose. But I really don't, I hate the traffic. I don't know why we can't have no traffic going on to Street, whatever that is,
Street B.
Street B, and just have all the condominiums come out to one end. And because, I know this is better, but these are little small first homeowner houses. They're going to have families, and I see the streets, I would envision them with children and strollers and bikes and things like that, and I just don't want a lot of traffic impeding that.
Well, I appreciate your concern. I don't know how to address it exactly. You know, we've met all the rules and regulations, planning and zoning. What you see is fairly typical. This is not something unusual as far as a design for a community project, and this is a community project. I mean, you've got open spaces, you've got places, you've got a pool, there's lots of community areas, there's trails. This is something you're not going to find in a typical development. These people could have taken this thing and taken stage one and made an application for stage one and just put in houses there and a few townhouses, and that would have been approved without any question. They could have gone to stage two. They could have taken it sequentially and avoided this. When you present a big project like this, there's a lot of questions. But that's the nature of a PUD. This is a PUD. It's a different animal than just coming in here and say, this is what we want to put in the way of single-family homes and a few townhouses. So it creates additional questions, and I understand that. At the same time, it's a big project.
That's why we have a lot of questions and concerns.
And I'll try to answer your questions.
Okay, that's great.
Can't see nothing wrong with it.
So you have 10 buildings, 12 units each, so we're just talking about a lot of traffic going down, but
Yeah?
on Hampton. Just the apartments alone, is it 240, would you say?
Pardon me?
You know, 240 cars just from the apartments alone.
Condominium, yeah.
I mean, the condominiums, we're making them condominiums now.
Yeah.
And then they will be condominiums. They will be
Yes,
sold.
yes,
And you'll have HOA fees on that then.
yes. Well, condominium association is not an HOA, but it's
Yeah,
similar in concept.
Sure, okay. Okay.
I think we're gonna, either way we look at it, even with the other way, whatever we do, we're gonna have traffic. And I don't know what else you can do with it. I mean, it's,
I do like the fact that half the traffic is going to be, 4 or 5 of these is going to be down here, away from the houses, down that way. So I do like that. He's probably moved it about as much as he can move it,
yeah,
unless you build a road all the way
yeah,
over.
but he's,
And that would be,
This is your best egress and ingress,
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work.
Bill,
If I may add a few things while you're thinking about some things, and part of this is on the applicant's benefit, I think, as well. This, I believe, is the third time they've been here, and the last time that they were here, they wanted a vote. And so what that meant was, we really don't tend to change anything. And they actually, since you did table it, they've came back and said they'll do condos, but the layout's the same. So unless I'm missing something, I don't think they're really interested in road changes and moving stuff around and doing all that. Now, you can certainly tell me that you're open to that, but I know last time they said they wanted you to vote on this. The other thing I want to point out, where that they're saying these are condos, they'll be built as such, and it's important you understand there's a big difference between building an apartment and a condo, because these will have to be certain fire separation and things where that they can be sold. You'll be able to sell that unit, and then there'll have to be a condo regime where that the grounds and all that are taken care of, and I'm sure he's familiar with that portion of it. So there'll be a significant cost there. It won't be traditional apartment buildings. The other thing I think is important to note, it's all R2 right now, and you can do condos in R2, and you can do townhomes in R2, and you can do these smaller homes in R2. So as long as they meet the lot size, now I'm not saying this meets the lot size requirements and things, it may not, because I don't remember off the top of my head, but what I'm getting at is, even in R2, they can technically do close to what they want to do here. And I think now, we've pushed them to where we're at least, we've had apartments moved, we've had the swimming pool moved, we've done some things that they've tried to, and we looked at the distance between Castlewood, and they know they're going to have to do some significant buffers and ensure that there's some separation there. The other thing I think to point out, this is at the end of Hampton Way. There's really nothing else going out there but residential to some degree. And it's all R2 down Hampton Way till you get, well, it's B3 and then R2 before you get to this part. And it's hotel, motel, and a Burger King, for example. And my point being, one day you may have big single-family houses. I doubt it, but it could happen because the interstate's right there. The other thing they've done that we liked from the planning, when our planner worked on it, the apartments are by the interstate. And so that's a good thing. So literally the back of all this whole section of apartments, that's interstate. The other part is there's a green space buffer, and then it goes back to the R1 lots that they're going to have, which are essentially R1C. And then they added a row of houses as well to buffer between Castlewood. And the other thing too and this actually may make a difference to you. This is not really a PUD. This has no business industry. It's not all encompassing. It really doesn't have a unique characteristic that makes it a PUD. So I will throw that out there. But it does have a significant amount of green space, it has walking trail amenities and things, so they've tried to take, I think, the avenue of, we want our people to, they can go right down the street to Burger King and to Richmond Center and all that, so that's kind of their business part, kind of, and then this, where they have the green space and amenities and swimming pool and things like that, it will keep them here instead, that's kind of, they got their own park essentially. I don't know if the swimming pool will be open to other people or not, but, and also the R2 density is what,
5.1.
5.1 or 5.2 an acre as far as number of units per acre. The density for a PUD is 8 units an acre, so most time people do a PUD, they try to get 7, 8 units an acre, and that's really why they want to do it. Their density is only a 4 point something, I can't see it, but it's,
4.9.
so it's, say, 5. So that's pretty good, and that's, so I'm not sure, and like I said, our planners worked on this, I'm not sure you're really going to get anything better than this.
Sure.
That's my opinion. And it's already R2. Now, if it was R1, then we could really be saying, well, right now, we're just going to get single-family houses, but it's already R2, and they can do what they're doing, or they could even come back and say, okay, no single-family, we'll just go townhomes all out through here. And that's what a lot of people call apartments here are really townhomes. So a good way to put it, Killarney, all right, it's been over there forever. People call those apartments here, but those are really townhomes. Townhomes are connected with their own, basically, look at it this way, their own front door, their own front yard, their own street frontage. So most of Killarney, for example, those are all townhomes. So they could do that all in here. So I just wanted to throw that out so everything was
It could be
clear, I
worse.
think. I'm sorry.
It could be worse,
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
and I think, we've certainly seen the opposite side of this, but I believe if they're going to undertake a development like this, they intend for it to be nice, and I believe they intend to retain portions of it, and they've committed to management on site, some things like that, and that may be some things that we want to get on the record and hold them to that.
Yeah, I say this, I appreciate all that they've done, because, I mean, pretty much what we've come back with on the day of work, to try, as you say, please everybody on this, and I don't think there's no more that, that they can do with this.
Is there any rendering of the type of buildings that they're planning to put up? Architectural drawings or something that we maybe see what's going to be there?
We have some, but at this point of the process, that's not something that we are really set to address.
How many houses are there going to be? Single family?
217 single-family lots.
It's a new phone, I don't know how to turn it off. Okay,
Mr. Faulkner, I assume?
Yes.
that's it, thank you.
There's your,
Okay, it's like
that's
my
all
other.
of your breakdown.
Keep that over when we get it over there. I appreciate it.
Yeah, since he's done this project, he's put houses over there by Castlewood, moved the apartments over there. He's moved apartments back over. In fact, they're not only just over, but they're past the road over there. He's put condominiums there. I think it looks like a pretty nice project.
And I think they understand when they're talking about condos, but it does change it quite a bit. It'll change the construction to a degree that it'll impact, for example, they could continue to rent them, but it will impact what they have to have for the rent. The building code will change quite a bit. Plus, they'll have to submit that condominium regime to us we can have that in place where that we have to approve it, so we ensure they have on-site maintenance and how all that works.
So they can continue to rent a condo?
They would be able, yeah, well, you can rent a house. So it'd be like if they built all R1C, if you had the money and it worked out, you could rent them all. The condominium really would allow them to sell the individual unit, but I guess a benefit of that is it still requires kind of one group to take care of the maintenance, the yard, the grass, all that stuff. If there's roof problems, stuff like that. But yeah, you can pretty much rent anything, yeah.
The advantage of condominium as far as upkeep is that the people who are living there have a vested interest in the building and the grounds, as opposed to an apartment where they don't. They just live there. A condominium owner has an interest. He actually owns the right to live there, and he is part of that condominium association.
If you will actually sell them as opposed to renting them. Because it concerned me last time, he talked about, well, that's just verbiage. Well, it's not. To me, there's a definite difference between a condominium and an apartment.
Ms. Perkins, I don't mean to, both Mr. Williams and Mr. McEachran, correct me if I'm wrong in what you're trying to say, but even if they are condominiums and they sell it to Dr. Miller can then rent it to you, is what I believe Philip's trying to say.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't going
That's true.
subletting necessarily, but
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Just like you can rent your house. It's yours to do what you wish.
Sam?
Does that, is the homeowners association or condo association, however you want to word that, they can prevent that if the documents are correct, from my understanding.
They could, but they might not. That is not necessarily part of a condominium association. Depend on how it was drafted.
But, ultimately, you have an owner of that property that's responsible for that property, the expenses of it one way or the other. So like if you were renting it to somebody and it was your property, you'd make sure that thing was taken care of, and if somebody was making a mess or whatever, that would be you to straighten that up. Yeah.
The condominium association, in essence, is owned by the people who own the units inside, and they are responsible for the upkeep, so you have an association responsible for it as opposed to an individual. So it's not like a house where somebody go and rent the house and trash the place. In a condominium, you've got the whole organization which is responsible for its upkeep and for its maintenance.
And you're paying dues.
And they're paying dues to make sure that happens, yes.
Most condominiums of things that I've been around, what they do too is they have somebody that takes care of the lawn. They have somebody that does all the stuff there.
Yes.
So, and maintain the condominiums. You're right, as far as houses go, sometimes it can be very difficult to get them to maintain them.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I do. So I think probably you're better off sometimes in condominiums.
Any more questions?
Where are the townhouse units?
Pardon me?
Where are the multifamily townhouse units?
Smaller density blocks, attached, not attached.
They would be these ones and these ones. And then these lots, I believe, would be single family.
Pardon me?
And then these lots, I believe, are single family lots.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So it would be townhomes,
There's 2
single
blocks of
family,
townhomes that you
townhomes,
showed.
Is
condos.
Amberley Way and Castlewood, is it down there in the curve right where it goes off in the corner? That's over there. That's Castlewood Drive. Okay.
Where's Amberley?
Still at the bottom. a little bit.
Be at the bottom, straight in, cul-de-sac right in there, but it's on up that way, yeah.
That's what Castlewood is.
It's right down below it, yeah.
Right in here somewhere, am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's all the duplexes that are joining on the property. Castlewood, right?
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
It's Castlewood adjoining that property and duplexes on that end of the property.
If I don't know if I'm understanding you right, but Castlewood, so where he is there is Castlewood Drive, it's all single family there. If you drop down to Amberley Way, which is say right there, but it's to the left more, it cul-de-sacs as well. The back side of Amberley does back up to R2. There's no connection. On Hampton Way.
So those townhouses are across the street
Right, by the church.
by the church.
That's right, the church is right there.
All the multifamily is on the church side.
That's right, and all that between Castlewood and this development is all single-family homes.
And then up at the top there is the
Condominiums.
interstate.
Yeah, and that's the interstate.
Who's that speaking?
And then those other
Who's that?
streets are the
Never
streets.
mind,
that
shoot
we
the first
use.
guy.
That's right.
I
So
can
all
hear,
this
who's the
is,
first guy speaking, sitting next to Tyler?
I don't know.
No, no,
so,
no,
and
the one that's on the,
I
right now
To-
speaking.
point this out to you, so
Talking about
this is already zoned
No,
R2,
no,
so
I said
they're
who's
already
sitting
allowed
next
to
to
come out
Tyler.
and put townhomes.
Oh,
And
No, the other side.
do some things.
that's Tyler Fraser.
And then who's the other?
That's Phil.
That's why I was referring earlier, it's,
Phil Williams.
right now, we have a lot of
He's the
single-family homes,
manager
but we could just have a lot of
of-
townhomes.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
Phil Williams.
Oh, okay.
No,
I think what they've done overall is kind of mix it up enough and give us some single family between Castlewood and this development, for example, that I think's helpful. And this will be, I will point out, I'm familiar with Castlewood. There'll be a lot more distance between, say, the end of Castlewood or Amberley Way and the duplexes that are behind on, the right side of the road going down. Because some of those are pretty close. You all live on Amberley Way?
Yes, we live at the very end on the cul-de-sac.
Yeah. It's a nice area, and that's one thing, and we were at the meeting before.
Well, we were at the first meeting and the last meeting we watched on.
Yeah. So, and that's one thing we do want to try to protect, and that's why they moved the apartments and things. We certainly want to try to prevent townhomes or apartments from being right up on your houses.
How long do you think it's going to take to do all this?
At least 4 to 5 years.
So the other thing to throw out to answer that question, or to add to that, if this is a PUD, there are time restrictions that will apply. So, and I think you are familiar with this, and if you're not, I'll familiarize you with it right now. If this is changed to a PUD, they have a certain, so once they get that preliminary plat approved, they have basically 2 years to build that first phase of it if they create phasing. All right, so it's not, it can't just sit here as a PUD forever. Well, without going too much further into it, that'll be one of the, I'll call it a benefit, I guess, actually. It will encourage them to build, and if they don't, then it will come back to this body and you can rezone it whatever you want, as in the most appropriate zone, I should say it that way. So point being, if you wanted, if this goes from R2 to PUD and they do not comply with the timeline, and then we come back and you all determine that R1's the most appropriate or R2, then you would be able to rezone it back to that.
Why does it need to be a PUD? Why can't it stay R2?
We're ask ourselves the same question. In large part because the mayor suggested it. And we went to the mayor and asked what would help Richmond, and he suggested a PUD. He also suggested more single-family housing that's affordable and more apartments because there's a shortage. So that was due in large part for this design. That's where it came from.
What's the definition of affordable housing?
something, and we're looking at the $230,000 to $280,000 range.
How many square feet would the houses be?
1,200 square feet up.
You're not gonna get much under $1.60, $1.50 a square foot to build a house, no matter what size you build, or what you
Yeah.
put in it. So it does drive the cost to a certain degree.
The days of 2,500 square foot houses on half and 1 acre lots are over for most people. You can't afford it anymore. And, we're aiming this at something people can afford. We have to build something that people can buy. We have to determine what the market is, and that's what the market is.
Any more questions?
Is anybody against it?
Is anybody, it's not a zone change.
It is, isn't it? It's a zone map.
The only other thing to point out, if you continue, if you wish to continue with the zone change request, then if it's denied, obviously, it doesn't move forward, but if it's approved, it will go to the city commission as a normal zone change.
So is there anyone that is against it?
I'm sorry?
I was talking.
Oh, Okay.
Make a motion?
Make a motion for
I'll make a motion, we accept the zone map amendment request for 400 Par LLC, property located at Hampton Way, existing zone R2 and B3 to proposed zone PUD.
I'll second that.
That would be with the findings of fact.
With finding of
Good
facts, pending finding of facts, yes.
Picky.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend the zone change to the city commission. Commissioner Shu,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles,
Yes.
Commissioner Short,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
and Commissioner Estelle.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next would be the director's report.
One thing to add, I'm not sure if anybody watched the city commission meeting last night, but we did, there was the first reading for the cluster mailbox text amendment that we worked on that you all approved. The first reading was last night. So the next meeting, there will be the second reading, because it's technically amends the ordinance, our land code ordinance. So I think that's moving forward, and I'll let you know if anything comes up from that. So that's another example, kind of like solar farms. It's something that really everybody's behind the curve on, and we're just trying to get some things in place and regulate it. The other thing, there were 2 zone changes and annexation approved last night. So the city commission has a second reading, so it's final. The development on Tate's Creek, that was had, I think, 3 zone changes. Took it, I believe it was agriculture, I'm not sure.
Shorts.
And then Bill Short development was the other one. But 2 on Tate's Creek, and then the one out on 25 by South Point.
Right.
Those were all approved last night. So what that means, assuming they develop it, or want to develop it, and I'm assuming they do, the preliminary plats we'll work on them, work out all the details, and then it will come here and be presented to you so you can address the subdivision of land.
Was that one up there by Oaks, Gray Oaks?
Yes, one of them is right past Gray Oaks there on the left, and that kind of takes up that section, and I believe it goes down to the interstate. It's fairly good size.
Yeah.
And we've seen a concept months and months ago. I assume it's very similar. Seems to be laid out correctly, transitioning zones and things. But now some of it is R1, some of it I believe is R2 and R3, meaning single-family homes, duplex, townhomes, condos, and then the multifamily.
I think that's going to be in the back end with the multifamily one.
Yeah, I believe the concept I saw and what was approved, I believe the R3 is basically up by the interstate.
back, yeah.
And if anybody feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what, which again, if we're gonna have them, that's probably the best thing you can ask for. But the zones were approved, so now we'll address the preliminary part of it. So what that will mean, you know, if it's R1, for example, we're stuck with R1, it just means we have to try to create the best development that we can create and subdivide the land correctly and that kind of thing. So, and as we move forward, and I know I've talked to some of you about it, but we really want to keep trying to follow the comprehensive plan, and we're going to have that in hand, and we're going to talk about it with every zone change coming up, when they do come up, to let you know what the comprehensive plan at least recommends for that portion or parcel of land. And we also want to keep doing the best we can on transitioning correctly, so we don't go from R1 straight to R3 or R1 straight to B3, you know. So we don't have people in the backyard, they've got a grocery store or something.
Ask you this, someone comes with a development, whatever, do y'all show them the comprehensive plan? This is where we want business, this is where we want.
We don't necessarily, I mean, we may talk about it, we don't necessarily have it kind of as a rule of thumb where somebody comes and says, I want to do this. You know, a lot of the times people have an idea and they just want to know what steps they have to follow to try to get that approved. You know, because a lot of people recognize, I guess I have some encouragement in different areas, but I don't vote. So, you know, if I say you shouldn't do an R3, they may or may not really give that much credit, because it's got to come here. It depends on what you all think. So, but we do try to point it out and say, well, this is the comp plan. This is what, say, that property, what we intended for that to be. And that's why I think it's important every time we'll just pull it up here and you'll be able to see that in the comprehensive plan, the intent, or at least what we generally want to see there, as in what the planning commission want to see and the city commission, is whatever that use is. And we tried to really identify future land use. You know, in the past, it was kind of more of a gray area. This time with this comp plan, we really tried to say, we want to see this acreage R1, we want this one mixed use, we want this one, you know, R3 or whatever. And so right now, I think our comp plan is on target for the most part. Other than that, we've kind of slowed down a little bit because we've had so many zone changes and things going on as far as amendments to the development ordinance or land code. Sounds like we're going to probably have to stop some of the stuff we're doing and address the solar text amendment, so that we'll focus on that between now and next time. We'll have that before you. And that is something we intend to be fairly restrictive on. And so that'll be something you'll have to consider. And we'll try to get that in your packets and everything, give you time to look at it before you get here. And other than that, I think that's it. Do we still have some folks here? Okay. I'm saying we might have some people. If we have anybody here tonight that's wanting to talk about anything that's not on the agenda, as in a certain use in an area or something like that, or a sober living home or something like that, my recommendation is, because it's not on the agenda, we'll adjourn this meeting. If they want to talk, I'll talk to them separate. So we won't have a quorum after that. I'll talk to them with Mr. Frazier.
Okay.
Other than that, I think that's all I have.
I've got, but it might come on to other business. I don't think Menards is coming. But is there any way that you could get them to cut that road through there?
Well, that was one of the things when we approved it.
Yeah, I think where we have an issue, I'm not saying we can't ask or try to really encourage them, figure out a method to do that. That was before I was involved. the best practice would have been, and I don't believe exists, is if, you know, if that was going to be a city street, we should have bonded that or had a letter of credit or something there so that we could hold them accountable, and if they didn't do it, we could do it. My understanding, unless there's something out there I don't know of, and I don't think there is, we don't have such an instrument right now to do that. So all we could really do is ask, unless maybe there's something on the record somewhere that
It's in the
maybe
minute.
look into that. I'm not sure, I don't know. I don't know if they do it or not.
Well, I mean, if you just check and see, I mean, it's needed bad.
Yeah, I agree. And,
Because they had a road there,
It was
Yeah,
a
they
road
took
that
it out.
they took it out.
and they took it out.
It should have been, when they took it out, it should have been bonded, that it was gonna go back, and that way, if they don't ever build, we can build our street back. And, that, I don't think they have. But it's a good point, good question, and I don't believe they are coming, at least in 2023. That's my understanding.
Is there a certain time for the workshop that you all would do? A certain time?
On the workshop?
Uh-huh.
It's really up to you all.
I think we should make it at 5:30 though, so people can get to it.
Yeah, even after 4, 4:30.
4 would be okay?
Yeah, I can leave at work at 4 or 3:30. I just can't do it at 2 o'clock.
I understand. I mean, because I
But
couldn't.
don't you need to get some information together from Maysville?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got.
Yeah, before the next one, yeah.
Depends on you.
And I don't necessarily have to be 100% done by the time we have the workshop, but I'll have something solid that we can work with. And
We couldn't meet a half an hour before this meeting. Next 5 o'clock's too early for everybody.
I think you get enough done in a half hour, I
No.
doubt.
You don't think so? Okay,
Good idea.
It's a good idea, but I don't think.
Good.
okay.
So you're gonna, what time? Five thirty?
Well, if you can get through at 4,
Yeah,
is that okay with you, Gary?
I can do it as early as 5. I can do it as early as 5. I can come
Okay.
right from work.
5, okay.
okay.
That's
On what date?
5:30, something like that, whatever. The only thing to keep in mind is we need to it'd probably just be easier if we don't do it on Tuesday or Wednesday. It'll just have to be an alternate. Probably do it on Sunday. How's that sound?
Okay.
You got to buy done if we do it on Sunday.
I'm sorry?
You got to buy done if we do it on Sunday.
Hey, that's a good day then.
Happy meals for everybody.
I'll make a joint.
That works.
I'll make a
So
motion.
if we can, if you want, you can make a decision now, or now that we know a time, Tyler can work on it and send out something to Mr. Estelle there, and we can send something out to everybody and say we're going to do it on this day. Does that work?
Okay.
Does anybody have a specific day they can't do it? The reason why I said Wednesday is because that's when we do our other meetings, as you all know, some code board meetings, and Board of Adjustment, and probably next Tuesday we can't, we've got that architectural review board, right? Yes, we can.
If we do it the week before our normal meeting, it would be March 9th.
Be good.
That would be fine with me.
It'd be
That'll
fine.
work.
And then Philip doesn't have to do 2 meetings back to back.
It'd be fine.
Works for me.
March the 9th.
March 9th, whatever's going on March 9th.
March the 9th.
Well, I mean, you might if you have
Checking
a
my-
code board.
I'll make that motion that we adjourn.
Motion for adjournment?
Second.
What day's March 9th on?
Thursday.
All right.
It would be the day after your code board meeting if you had one.
We'll figure it out. We'll get
Figure it out.
We'll plan on March 9th unless something.
Okay.
doesn't work.
Who made that motion? Sorry. And second was,
Second. It doesn't
Okay.
matter.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.